Hi, this is Keith Weaver with the Top Executive Strategy Podcast, where CEOs, COOs, and business owners share strategies for better success. This is 6 questions in 9 minutes because the best strategies are concise business advice. And we're happy to have our guest with us today, and we're going to get right to him with question number 1 in a few sentences. Tell us who you are and what you do.
AJ Osborne. I am a self-storage investor. I buy, own, run, manage self-storage facilities across the United States. We focus on a value-add strategy. So we buy underperforming assets and turn them around. We've converted bankrupt super Kmart's office buildings into self-storage. We do ground-up development. And I own several other businesses, including health brokerage firms, product companies, and technology companies.
I was going to say, you're pretty involved with a lot of different things, so that's great. Great to have you on. We look forward to your insights.
Well, thanks for having me on.
So question number 2, what's the best thing about being a business leader?
I think always for me, it was about freedom. It was about controlling my own destiny. I've never been shy from hard work. That doesn't bother me in the least, as long as there's a point to it. And as long as I am working for a future, not just today. And I think that's what happens with entrepreneurship. I think that's what happens with investing in business ownership is the effort that I put in today, I know is just not for today, but it will help me, my family, and others in the future. And so being actively engaged in creating something better in a future that is better for me, my family, that makes it fun to wake up in the morning, and that makes it exciting every single day, as opposed to just get the day over with.
I love that attitude, and I think there's lots of people out there that would agree with you. So question number 3, I hear from other business leaders that a lot of times their people strategy in their business can be more challenging than their actual business strategy in running their business. Your thoughts?
So employees has always been an interesting thing across our different platforms of businesses, because some businesses are much more reliant on human capital than other businesses. So obviously, when you have a sales business, like we have a high-end B2B sales business, a brokerage benefit company that is extremely centered around people, and they are the assets, right? You say 90% of our assets go home at 5 o'clock, whereas the other side, self-storage, it is much more dependent on the physical asset itself and our ability to have a contractual relationship with a tenant. When dealing with human capital, those problems are still like we have more human capital on one end of the spectrum, less on the other one. But in relationship to the problems with higher intense, more centric business models around human capital, the problems tend to be exaggerated. Right? Business models that have human capital, it's always important, but its significance to the business model is less. There tends to be more problems, but they're not nearly as exaggerated. So when I look at these two models, it's about mitigating, first of all, larger problems that can come up, and we deal a lot with upfront communication and contractual natures of that. People training, putting forth effort, but having clear expectations is really important. So when eventually problems do happen with employees, these problems are mitigated and they're framed in a certain context, in a certain way that was already understood and agreed upon. If you can take care of that, you can really minimize complexity across the board and streamline both for the employee and for the employer.
Well, that was a pretty good and thorough answer, so I won't even add anything, but thank you. That's great. So question number 4, what strategy would you like to share with other business leaders today?
Yeah, value add. And what I mean by value add is when you take an underlying approach of fundamentals and you analyze the fundamentals on who your customer is, what your revenue drivers are, and if you get really good at that, most other problems are easily solved. I find most business owners get into problems because the fundamentals aren't strong of their business across the board, right? That could deal with distribution, acquisition, It could do with revenue management or human capital management. It's always the fundamentals when you really come down to it, right? It's if you could really get good at that and then have a framework in which you qualify what good means. So we have a quality control person for both policies, procedures, human capital, because it's just not about being good, but it's about everybody understanding what is the expectations and good result of the fundamentals of our business. If I'm looking at acquiring a business, I'm usually looking for poor execution on everything from marketing, revenue management. We're looking for distribution problems of product and presentation of product, right? The product itself could vary across lots of different businesses and lots of different platforms, but it's really the execution that's the problem. And the execution almost always comes down to fundamental, not complex things. They may be more boring. They take a lot more work. And a lot of business owners don't invest as much as they should in the fundamentals while they're distracted or looking at other things and putting their money elsewhere, and the business suffers.
Very well said. And that's what I spend most of my time with clients on is helping them get back to the fundamentals and make sure that those are all aligned and working the way that they're supposed to be, and have consistency. Like you said, the quality has to be there not only today, but going on consistently into the future. So great philosophy and great strategy for any business. So question number 5, what other successful business owners, CEOs like yourself, would you like to maybe do a shout out to or acknowledge and you think might be good on the podcast?
Yeah, so I'm fairly lucky when working in the sales world. We worked with employers all over the United States. We saw business models that were successful and ones that weren't. And really, it was interesting in working with several that had been successful in certain spaces, but not at the core tenets of the space. So I think of like self-storage for an example, right? That's a investment platform. But there's one leader who's also a business partner of mine, and that's Lance Watkins. And he's been successful by looking at the problems in the space that aren't the traditional problems and solving those problems. And that was really concentrated in technology and a property management system and data problem that didn't allow connectivity through vendors and other things in the industry that was the local owners of the business were suffering through. So he owned the assets, but then solved the problem. So we came together, started a company called Tenant Inc., which he's been a leader in that space, in that industry, and in the technology. And that's interesting to me because it's an emerging business model, right? I mean, if you look back to before 2008, self-storage was a junkyard. People didn't want to be it. They didn't want to own it. They didn't want to be around it. Now it's the hottest real estate investment out there that's outperformed every single other asset class, not by a small amount, but by leaps and bounds. Talking about the REITs alone at 18% annual return. The next highest is something like 13, and that 13% return is above and beyond all the rest. So it's just blown away, almost double all the other real estate asset classes. And here's a guy that's been in this space in this transitional time and applied new technologies and ways of thinking to it. And that's offered a lot of interesting product types that are going into the market, and a thought leader in the space as well as entrepreneur.
Awesome. Well, I'd love to have him on and learn a little bit more. There's a lot of businesses out there that are that way, where they're taking, two components that are not working well and putting those together to better different spaces, like you said, whether it's technology and other things or whatever, to really add better systems to a space or better, flow of things. So that's really a popular thing. And like you said, it sounds like he's been very successful with it. So that would be great. So question number 6, just kind of a final fun question. Tell me about one of your favorite past bosses.
Be happy to. Yeah, there was a guy by the name of Jim, and he was an older sales guy in an industry which he had tremendous success and rose to be an executive at a company worth $20 billion, I think, and the top CEO and executive there, and sits on the board. Very, very successful. And he was a fantastic, I think, leader and boss, because amongst all the noise, he really understood the business. He really understood why they had been successful this whole time. And although there was changes and lots of different things, he was able to be an anchor, I think, to the company, and an anchor to the culture, as far as remembering why that company exists and what they do, and to not get too distracted from the things that had made them successful and would continue to make them in the future. And it wasn't a lot, right? He wasn't a person that was overly lavish, flashy, great speeches, getting out and doing cool stuff on stage. But he was the person I think everybody looked to. And he was the person that a lot of people were there for, and the person that everyone felt really understood, not just the business, but the company. And that was always very interesting to me, that there could be a million people that were better than him at certain aspects in the company, but there was nobody that was better at understanding the industry, the company, the people of it, and its values. And that alone just brought so much value. And I really respected that, that it was simple things that, even though other people would come up, flashy new technology, and, oh, this is happening in the space, everything like that. Whenever he would talk to you or he would bring it up, there was just truth that kind of rang to what he said. And it was the thing that everybody fell back on. So I like that.
That's really cool. And you're right. There's a lot of businesses out there that are trying to either pivot or innovate, but if they're not grounded into the fundamentals of what they do, who they are, and those values, they often get lost in the weeds. So you need people like that. That's an anchor. That's a great story, though. Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for being on. It's been great. Before we leave, can you tell people how they might be able to connect with you?
Yeah, I have a site, selfstorageincome.com, which is principally around self-storage investing, like education, or any people know. But the email goes straight to me. Instagram, AJ Osborne on there, and Twitter, AJ Osborne 1. So any of those platforms, anything you want to do, happy to reach out and talk.
And again, thanks for being on, AJ. It's been a pleasure. And this is Keith Weaver with the Top Executive Strategy Podcast. And for more insights, you can follow us at Weaver Business Coaching, find us on LinkedIn, and of course, listen to us on your favorite podcast platform. And we wish you all the best success.